Hello and welcome to another edition of AFL Trade Talk with Betfair. My name is Karl Kaldawi. I'm joined by Darren, Parkin. There's been some massive news break last night, and that's Damien Hardwick, the triple premiership coach for Richmond, has retired. Plus, so much other stuff happened on the weekend, Daz. It's going to be a big show.
Yeah, it is. Obviously, we had the controversy of the Kangaroo-Sydney game after everything that happened with Alistair Clarkson last week, and now obviously Damien Hardwick stepping away. We've heard him speak today and suggested that it was going to be his last game regardless, even if they didn't drop the match late to Essendon. But yeah, what a journey, what a legacy he's had, and we'll touch a lot on that. But also significant movements. We can give ourselves a pat on the back too. We had a pretty good run last week.
We did have a pretty good run, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. But let's talk about a couple of big things that happened over the weekend. They were full of some awesome moments, and Dreamtime at the G was an absolute thriller on Saturday night. That was a fantastic game, as you said. Also, as you said, North lose to the Swans in controversial circumstances, but any highlights for you, Daz?
Yeah, I think the win certainly of Essendon, who have had a lot of close games against good teams, to win that with their backs to the wall. The fixture opens up a bit for them. We'll touch on that later. Kangaroos got a really good response, and you really feel for them the way that game ended. We know that it is a rule, and obviously clubs are familiar with it, but they've had a chaotic week, so you can understand them maybe overlooking something. But Port Adelaide, obviously a big result for them on the weekend as well. But they're probably the major takeaways, and Essendon, I think. That was significant for them. They probably deserved it based on the run they've had.
Well, we're going to use this opening segment to talk about a couple of things, but we really want to dissect the form of Zac Butters, and we want to apologise to viewers because he has absolutely slipped under the radar. Daz has got some awesome stats that he's going to take us through to show just how good his form has been over the past few weeks. But I just want to take you to some Brownlow stats on the Betfair Exchange, which are quite remarkable. So Zac Butters' price before round one was $230. He drifted out to $500, and there was money matched at that point, and that was before round 5. He then went to $230 at round 8, $150 at round 9, and now he's remarkably into $12.50, Daz.
Shows about, slipping under the radar to go from $150 to $12.50 in 1 week. On the back of you can only get 3 votes. They can't give him 15 votes for that game. So it's quite a remarkable move, and you maybe snuck up on a few. And last week I was doing stats on the disposal lines that we offer, and Zac Butters is the second most successful player in the comp in that space. 15-7 he is going over the line, so that's about 70%. But if you look at his year, he's averaging 27, but he's averaging 30 in the last 7 weeks, which is the most in the AFL. But I also sort of dug into it as to how important he is to the Port Adelaide side. In their last 8 losses, he's only averaged 21 possessions. In their last 12 wins, 29.5. So when he's up there winning and when they can put the clamps on him, that's when Port Adelaide are vulnerable. So he's become a real barometer in that side. Their barometer used to be Robbie Gray, who's obviously now retired. They've got the likes of Wines and Boak and Rosie and those sorts of players. But yeah, Zac Butters is flying, and Friday night would have been the best game of his career.
So he was massive against the D's, and it was the 4th highest rated game of the year behind Tom Hawkins against Essendon when he kicked a bag, Bontempelli against Fremantle. On top was Charlie Curnow against West Coast in round 7, where he stuffed the stat sheet, but finished with 9 goals. That was the main one. But Zac Butters was just absolutely incredible, and no doubt in my mind he's going to get the 3 Brownlow votes. And when we talk about the Brownlow medal leaderboard and the predictions, there's going to be some things to consider there.
It's funny on that disposal line, because we were discussing it on Friday, because it was one of the higher lines set for him. I think it was 25.5. We're thinking, do we go, how do we play this? And I think I messaged you 10 minutes into the third quarter. Got it, done, tick. So he was already over.
Funnily enough, I think the thinking was back the under, because his disposal line had never been that high. And you were getting a really good price to back the under, as you always do on the Betfair Exchange. And the thing I love about betting on the disposal lines on Betfair is the lines don't change like the corporates do, who change their lines depending on who's betting on what and what their liability is on some selections. So, yeah, I would implore punters to go check out the Betfair Exchange and have a look at the disposal lines, because there's some fantastic markets to bet into. But the second part of our review is we want to talk about and touch on Mr. Damien Hardwick, because he has been incredible for the Richmond Football Club.
Yeah, he has. This is a club that was maligned for 3 decades. Obviously, they won a flag in 1980, made a grand final in 1982, and then spent a lot of time in the doldrums. There was even a documentary called The Lost Years made about them, sort of reflecting on sacked coaches and everything that went wrong. And along came Damien Hardwick in 2010. He's now coached the most games of anybody in the history of that club at 307, ahead of Tom Hafey and Jack Dyer and these sorts of people. And he's also joined a pretty rare club. So you've got Mick Malthouse, Ron Barassi, and also Lee Matthews that have won premierships at 3 different clubs. Damien Hardwick is the only other member of that group. Obviously, between 2017 and 2020, he had Richmond top 4 every year. They won 3 premierships, 76% of wins. And one of those people that success has always followed. He played under 19s at North and won premierships. He was an assistant coach at Hawthorn and won premierships. And yeah, he's turned around a club that was always a sleeping giant in the Tigers and made them relevant again. And yeah, I don't think anyone can begrudge him stepping away.
And I just absolutely love how he's basically changed the AFL in so many different ways. The way Richmond, when they were playing their best footy and obviously winning flags, the way that they were playing was just a style that couldn't be beaten across the competition. And a lot of people used to say, well, you know, it's luck. But no, Richmond made their own luck, and that was their game style. They were tapping it forward and always getting into attacking positions.
Yeah, their last win against Geelong, for anyone who watched it, there was a lot of that vintage Richmond, that surge football where it would be, if I'm surrounded by 4, maybe I'll kick it off the ground 30 metres, then I'll punch it inside 50 and everybody will swarm forward. It might look ugly at times, but it was just the ability to play the percentages and go territory, swarm, get numbers surging onto the ball. And they were overwhelming teams during their prime years.
It was an ugly masterpiece. I think
Absolutely.
That's the best way to look at it, because everything, although it doesn't look like there's much plan, there was definitely a strategy with that chaotic hitting the ball forward. And Damien Hardwick has turned Dustin Martin into one of the greatest players of all time, of course. Well, let's get into some of the results from last week and have a look at some of the movements in some of the Betfair Exchange markets. We went all right last week, Daz, didn't we?
We did. We looked at Port Adelaide, Melbourne head to head last week. Port were $2.95, top 4. Melbourne were $1.36, and we thought if you back Port, back them now. They're into about $2.20 for top 4 on the back of that. You were big on Collingwood for the minor premiership at $2.64. I think they're $2.10 now, so that's come in a fair way. We spoke about Lachie Neale's Brownlow odds. They've been cut in half. He'll probably get the 3 against the Gold Coast Suns. He's gone from mid-20s down to 11 or 12. We also were pretty keen on North at the line, just based on Sydney's odds being prohibitive. They were $1.12 despite being out of form. And North probably should have won the game on reflection and easily covered a 6.5 goal line. Unders in the Bulldogs Adelaide game always looked likely given the weather in Ballarat for that game. And you were also easing on Melbourne for the top 4 and the flag, and they've now been replaced by Brisbane as second favourite. So, overall, it was a pretty good weekend.
And it's something that we really wanted to get ahead of there, that D's one. They're now out to $6, so their price has doubled. Their lay price is absolutely inflated a lot. Collingwood, obviously, into 210 as I'm currently looking at the odds now. So some of that line betting was absolutely fantastic, Daz, as well. And looking forward to hopefully a couple more trading strategies. The big one that was a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth was Clayton Oliver going down with a hamstring injury. Obviously, if you didn't lay off, his price has drifted significantly in the market. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But first, we're going to go to the prediction segment. So we're going to start off with the Brownlow predictor. Daz, is there anything that you want to talk about? Anything you find interesting about the Brownlow predictor this week?
Probably the 2 that stood out. You mentioned Oliver getting injured, and obviously that's sunk his odds quite a bit. If he's still got plenty of votes in the bank, we would think. But Petrarca, we've been monitoring those 2 head-to-head for most of the year. I actually think Oliver, that we haven't quite squeezed him in for a vote in the Brownlow predictor, but he is a chance. I think he was Melbourne's best player. But Petrarca's still hovering around the 10.50 mark, so I don't mind that. I think he's still going to attract quite a bit of attention. And Lachie Neale, that big watch, I think he was 24s, even as high as 28s. He's probably got 8 votes in the last month, which has pushed him down to 11.50 as it stands at the moment. So, I think Lockie Neal, clearly a proven vote getter. He nearly won the Brownlow last year as well. He's already won one in the past. And Brisbane are flying. So, he's the one certainly for me.
I just want to touch on something interesting. And I know most of the talk that we've given around Nick Dacos throughout the show this year has been positive, but we've never really been keen to back into him in the Brownlow markets because he's been too short. Over the last couple of weeks, his form hasn't been amazing and clubs have been tagging him. On the weekend, he got tagged again. He had 27 disposals with 4 kick-ins against the Blues. 15 of those disposals were handballs, and it was his lowest amount of kicks in a game this year. He was electric in the second quarter, and that saw Collingwood extend their lead against the Blues. And then when Ed Curnow was moved on to Dacos, the clamps really went on, and it seemed like Dacos couldn't handle that tag. He was trying to get touches, trying to get in around the ball, but could only be left with just some dinky handballs, some dinky 1-2. So really had no effect on the game after halftime.
It's interesting that for Nick Dacos, I think that's going to be a tactical watch across the competition because clearly all of the attention, or a lot of the attention, has gone into him in the last month, and it hasn't stifled Collingwood in any way. And there's been a lot of analysis about the fact that they've been able to put the clamps on Dacos to a degree, but Collingwood are still running rampant. So will teams just approach that differently and go, yeah, okay, we can limit Nick, but it's not doing anything to their chances. So we'll put more attention into Degoe or perhaps Pendlebury or one of these Crisps, these sorts of players. And therefore Nick gets off the chain again, and they just try different things to restrict Collingwood. But at the moment, he's certainly not under control, but they've limited him a bit.
So interesting point, and I just want to touch on the fact that, okay, maybe tagging Nick Dacos works, but does it actually have an overall impact on a football game? Well, you have to say yes if you're using the Carlton versus Collingwood example from Sunday, because up until halftime, Nick Dacos was playing very good football, and we did see Collingwood play, obviously extend their lead and margin against the Blues, and they just looked way too good. But after halftime, not saying that the Blues played better football, but obviously limiting Dacos's influence on the game, we actually didn't see Collingwood extend their lead at all. Actually, Carlton won the second half against the Pies, so you have to consider that at least a little bit. But
I think it was 3 goals 9 to 3 goals 2 in the second half. So Carlton could have crept a bit closer with some conversion after halftime.
I think where Dacos really gets off the chain is when he's running from half back and he's not stopped. If he's getting in links of 2, 3, 4 handballs or kicks, that's when he's so dangerous because it's breaking up the whole ground, and then Collingwood are able to get an easy kick inside 50. Let's move on, Daz. Any other players that you want to have a look at in the Brownlow section?
Jack Sinclair would have got the 3 votes for sure, I would think, on Sunday. The Brownlow predictor has him about 4 off the lead, and he's at about 70s. So there's some value in that.
To put it in context of what's actually relevant at the moment, he's predicted to have the same amount of votes as Zac Butters. Zac Butters is $13 on the exchange, and Jack Sinclair is $70, which is remarkable value if you look at it like that.
Yeah, and a vote behind Bontempelli, who's $5.80. So, it's obviously Bont's a superstar, but it's interesting odds.
I know that we made it a betting strategy a couple of weeks ago to back Jack Sinclair at a massive price on the exchange. I think it was $150. He had 3 quiet weeks, so the last game he polled in, according to the Brownlow predictor, was a 3-vote game. In the next 3 games, he hadn't received a vote for the predictor. And then on the weekend, obviously, Kick 2 had 37 or 38 touches, and he gets 3 votes. So you have to say that if Jack Sinclair has one more 3-vote game, and if it comes next week, he's just going to go straight into $12, $13 because that would put him in the first couple in Brownlow contention.
Picks up, so a couple of weeks ago, St Kilda beat North Melbourne in a very ugly game. Sinclair was solid that day, maybe not BOG, but in a really ugly game, his ball use stood out. So there is an outside chance that he could pinch a vote or 2 in that game, given they won, which might also surprise on Brownlow night.
Well, let's have a look at the AFL ladder predictor on the Betfair Hub right now. And Melbourne's still rock solid. Their rated price $3.80, followed by Collingwood $6.25. 26, Geelong 641, Brisbane 750, Sydney are still there at $18, and they're not going well at all, Daz. And then it's rounded out by Port Adelaide, Western Bulldogs, Adelaide, and St Kilda. We no longer see Carlton there. They've drifted. Their rated prices drifted significantly as well. Anything that you like there, Daz? Anything that you want to touch on?
So according to the predictor, the value sits with Sydney, surprisingly. So they're rated at 18, listed at 70. But then you look at, say, Adelaide in the 20s, 46 you can get on them at the moment. St Kilda, early 30s, you can get mid-40s on them. And those that are considered to be slightly overs, Port Adelaide, their rated price is about $20. You can get $9.80 on them at the moment. The Bulldogs also considered to be slightly overs, and Brisbane considered. So Brisbane are now second favourite for the flag behind Collingwood, but their rated price is out a little bit further than that. So according to the predictor, the value actually still sits with the Ds.
Just interesting to have a look at some of the top four prices. The AFL ladder predictor has Melbourne finishing first, Geelong finishing second, Collingwood finishing third, and Sydney finishing fourth. So the predictor sees something in Sydney. I'm not quite sure what it is at this stage, but it'll be interesting to see what happens by round 22, 23, where Sydney is rated.
Yeah, obviously the North win was ugly by every measure, and they should have been beaten in the game, but we'll sort of touch on it a little bit later in the buy, hold and sell, but sometimes maybe that's all you need. You just need something like that. You just find a way to win. You break the shackles. They've got Carlton, then the bye. If they can find a way to get through that, then have a week off. You never know. We know that they're a side that's always around the mark and always bounces back. There was nothing in that game on Saturday that suggests that they're on the march, but they did get the points, so you never know.
They did get the points. Well, let's go over to buy, hold and sell. Daz, I'm going to keep your momentum going. Who are you buying this week?
Buying Essendon based on the fixture. So we know they've had a really tough draw, playing Port Adelaide and Melbourne and Collingwood and St Kilda and Brisbane and all of those teams. They look like they were going to get done by Richmond. They found a way across the line. If you're going to back them for top 8, it's probably wise to do it now. Now, I'm not saying they'll definitely make it, but they've got West Coast and North Melbourne in the next 2 weeks. So you can guarantee basically that their top 8 odds are going to be shorter in a fortnight than they are now. So if you're confident they can get on a run, they've still got to play North twice. They've still got to play West Coast twice. They've got winnable games like Carlton. Even their trickier games like Port Adelaide and Adelaide are both in Melbourne. So there is a chance for them to get on a bit of a run. So if you feel that they can make the 8, I reckon now, not in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we did touch on that they've played the whole top 8 in the first 10 rounds of the season, which is remarkable. This week, I know we bought into Lockie Deal last week, but I'm going to keep it going. I still think his value at the current price on the exchange. He had 35 disposals and 34 disposals in his last 2 weeks. He had a down week against Carlton the week before that, but then 35 the week before that. Sorry for the confusion there. But he loves playing at Adelaide Oval. They've obviously got the Crows this week, and he averages almost 30 touches at the ground. If you consider all the grounds that he's played in, multiple games at, he only averages more at Optus Stadium. So I think he's a really good chance to poll 3 again. With the way Brisbane are going, and if they win that game, he's surely going to be in the votes. I'm not going a sell this week, Daz, so I'm going to give you a secondary buy. It's Jeremy Cameron for the Coleman medal. After kicking 34 goals in 8 rounds of the year, he's been held to just 1 goal in the last 2 rounds. He didn't go without his chances against Fremantle. He kicked 4 behinds. His form hasn't been terrible. He's still winning a lot of the football. He's still marking the football. We've just seen Tom Hawkins be given that role. Maybe it's a matchup thing where he's been isolated in the forward 50 a little bit more, and he's certainly kicking goals. Jeremy Cameron has drifted out to almost $2.50 now on the Betfair Exchange. I think that if you thought Jeremy Cameron was going to win the Coleman medal at the start of the year, there's no reason to jump off that train. He's still got good form. So I'm not sure whether his price is going to get much bigger than that. So if you want to back into Jeremy Cameron for the Coleman on the Betfair Exchange, I think you're getting a good price right now.
Yeah, and I think one thing it has also shown is that it doesn't matter how well guys are playing early in the year, the chances of us seeing someone kick 100 goals are diminishing all the time. They just can't maintain that goal-scoring momentum that we saw back in the day. I think someone made a comparison that Jeremy Cameron got to 34 goals in 9 rounds, and think it was Josh Kay on Twitter that said, just like Tony Lockett did in 1991, but Tony Lockett went injured, 12, 10, 12. That was his run to 34. So times have changed.
An absolute freak. Who are you holding on this week, Daz?
The D's. Now, obviously, according to the ladder predictor, their price is still pretty good, but no Clayton Oliver. So in the next 2 weeks, they play Fremantle, who are back in form. Admittedly, it's in Melbourne, but they lost that game last year. Carlton can still be dangerous. I know they're on a bad run at the moment. Then they play Collingwood and Geelong, which are clearly the two where are they at matches, the Queen's birthday game or King's birthday game, and then Geelong after that. So I think Melbourne, we're going to learn a bit about them in the next month. 2 somewhat danger games and then 2 blockbusters for them.
I'm holding on Clayton Oliver for the Brownlow, but I think this is a really cheeky one, Daz, because Melbourne hasn't given an exact time frame to when they think Clayton Oliver is going to get back. I expect Clary to continue to drift significantly if he misses more than 2 games, but I'd say his Brownlow chances are still alive if he misses just the 2 games. Any more than that, I think he's real trouble to win the Brownlow. Doesn't mean he's not going to firm, but I just think if he's actually going to win it, he's going to be in trouble. I'd still back Clary if he missed just the 2 games, but for that reason, he's out for the short term, and I don't exactly know when that's going to be. I think I'm just going to hold on Clary this week. What do you think about that, Daz? Do you think that there's something a little bit cheeky going on there? I mean, are Melbourne going to come out next week and say Clary's available?
It's possible. I think we've seen it with a couple. I think Doherty was set to miss a month and played a week later. Similar thing happened with... it was one of Collingwood's players. I can't remember who. It might have been Darcy Moore earlier in the year, potentially. But yeah, there have been a few. Max Gawn, one who got back a little bit earlier. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, they've got the bye that they're going to play around with.
But the way he did do the hamstring, it didn't look great.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, it almost looked like that cramp sort of. He went straight for it, grasping his hamstring. Yeah. Let's hope it's not too bad for Clayton Oliver. Who are you selling this week, Daz?
Not really selling them because you can't, just based on the markets, but I think we probably have to mention them and give them a clip to some degree, and that's the Eagles. Clearly the lowest ebb they've ever found themselves in. Now, they're a proud club. They've won 4 premierships since their inception in the competition, but something has to give. They've got a lot of injuries, but they lost to another bottom 4 side by 116 points. They kicked 2 points in the second half in that game. Hawthorn had 71 inside 50s to 29. I've never seen a discrepancy like that. So not sure where you put the Eagles in terms of those categories, because I was the same as you. There wasn't a lot I liked to sell, but I think we have to mention them. They can't get away with that.
Let's go over to our trading strategies. Daz, are you having a bet this week?
Yeah, probably no reason to tip Richmond other than what has happened, but I still feel that Port Adelaide have been up for a couple of months and we've spoken a lot about them, and I still really like what they're doing, but that's a danger game if ever there was one. Obviously, to play Richmond away, Richmond have had the coaching change. They'll be keen to probably pay respects to Dimmer this week. They're slight underdogs at about 210, 215 in the game. I think Port Adelaide are vulnerable in that game, so I'd be probably backing Richmond. And Joe Daniher, just a sneaky one for the Coleman at $23. He's a fair way back in the market, but he's only 6 goals off the lead, and he's kicked 21 in the last 6, including 10 in the last 2 weeks. So the issue for Joe is often consistency, but ever since they put him in the ruck a month or so ago, he's really found his feet, and he's gone back forward and he's marking everything. So yeah, sneaky one on Joe for the Coleman for me.
Yeah, I like that one. Daz, well, I'm not going to jump off Lockie Neal at this stage at all. I'm still keen to back him in for the Brownlow, at least until he gets into single figures. Once he does get into single figures, I'll look at laying him. We're going to go to our back or lay questions this week, Daz, and I'm going to start by asking you, does Damien Hardwick go down as one of the greatest coaches of all time?
I think so. I think if you coach over 300 games, 3 premierships, including back-to-back, and given the legacy of everything that had happened at Richmond before he arrived, absolutely. And I think if you put that in the context of transitioning from being a very successful player into coach, which is not something that happens a lot. You look at some of the great coaches, they weren't always super players. Obviously, people like Lee Matthews and Ron Barassi were an exception to that. But yeah, I think what he's been able to do and the fact that he's kept Richmond up for so long, how do you see his legacy?
I think I think for you to become one of the greatest coaches of all time, you have to have impacted the game in some sort of way, help change rules, help shape it. And I think, Damien Hardwick has obviously done that. He's been absolutely terrific for making the game enjoyable for us to watch. And obviously, we like to have a bet, but first and foremost, we're just lovers of the game and lovers of AFL. So he's absolutely done that for me.
The one I had for you was that effectively it's not quite the same as asking who the second best team in the competition is, because it's not always the same answer. But if we assume Collingwood are the best team in it and are favoured to make the grand final, who's best equipped on one day at the MCG to beat them in a grand final?
That is a very, very good question, Daz. And I'm having a look at all the teams in the competition, and it's really easy to rule them out.
Mm-hmm.
I can rule out Brisbane. I think they're a fantastic side, but at the G, and I just don't know whether they could step up to Collingwood. Geelong, they need to have their luck with injuries. If they've got the personnel on the day, then I'm probably giving Geelong a strong chance, and they've obviously been there before and won it last year. Port Adelaide, I think I'm going to do is like a bit of a smoky, because I think the way that they play football, they've got a combative style as well. And I think you sort of got to fight fire with fire against Collingwood. What I want to see probably in the second half of the year are the teams that can really hold up when they've got a lead and absorb that pressure. And I think a team that can absorb pressure, especially if they've got a scoreboard advantage against the team they're playing against, it's probably going to be a team that suits Collingwood, because we know how good they come late. So probably Port Adelaide, but I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest anyone at this moment. If you played the grand final tomorrow, Collingwood beats every single side in the competition, probably convincingly. What do you think, Dad?
Yeah, I think obviously we'll find out in the next month, but I think based on venue, based on experience, I would still think Melbourne are a chance. Obviously, they'll play them on the Queen's birthday, but Melbourne, their body of work still stacks up pretty well. I mean, the other side's going well, the Western Bulldogs, but they've found Melbourne tricky. They found Collingwood tricky and Melbourne tricky, you would think. And Geelong, I agree with you. If they get everything together, then they're always a chance, and they were certainly competitive against Collingwood in round one. But I'd still say Melbourne just at this point. I need to see more from Melbourne, I think, just at this point. So they're definitely a watch. A couple more things just before we finish off the show, Daz. I got one question, and then we're going to talk about our 3-2-1 for the whole round. But my question is I had a look at the Betfair Exchange, and Will Ashcroft for the Rising Stars $1.85, and Harry Sheasel is $2.80. Why do you think that is? And just for context, and what I'm thinking is, I think they should be much closer together in terms of their value, because if you could hand the award to both the players, you would do that 100%. If there could be co-winners, you would 100% give it to them. So why is the price discrepancy quite large? The third elect that was putting a bit of pressure on them was Mitch Owens, who got knocked out on Sunday. So obviously that limited his input in that game, and he'll miss the next one as well. So that does push those two guys a little bit shorter. The only reason being, obviously, with Brisbane going well and Ashcroft holding his own, but I mean, Sheasel played higher up the ground on the weekend, kicked two, nearly won them the game, and I think he's really standing out in a side where he's going to get a lot of attention. So I'd have them neck and neck for mine. And if you asked me without showing me the odds who'd be favourite, I'd probably go Harry. So I think there's a little bit of value in that for sure.
That's a really interesting one that you say that without looking at the odds. Who do you think should be favourite? And if you say Harry, then surely that their prices should be a little bit closer. Does that make Harry Sheasel a back prospect then?
Yeah, I think so. Look, 280 at the moment. I know that's not juicy odds, but I think in a two-horse race, if I was voting on the award, I think it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think he'd be getting the 5.
Nice, Daz. All right. Well, the thing that we're going to finish the show on, and we might kick off with this in the next few weeks, but if there was only 6 votes to be handed out at the end of each round, who would get these votes, Daz? 3-2-1 style, just like the Brownlow?
Yeah, I'll go 1 vote to Jack Sinclair, who in a tight game was clearly best on ground for the Saints. They wouldn't have won, I don't think, without him. So career high disposals, also kicked a couple off half back. Zach Merritt, very similar, close game. He was outstanding. First half, brilliant, and then finished strong. And then clearly the best player of the round was on the very first night, and that was Zac Butters, who had 25 at halftime, 41 for the game. Given those three matches were all tight, and those three were clearly BOG in the winning team, I think they get the votes.
So from this round forward, I reckon we'll keep a tally on these and see who wins the Trade Talk medal at the end of the year. I suppose that's what we can call it. But that's all we got time for. Just to let all the watchers, viewers know, Betfair's content team are going to be putting out some mid-season report cards and have a look at some of the trading strategies that they placed at the start of the year. A couple of the best and fairest smokies, rising stars and the like. But that's all we got time for this week. Make sure you tune into the Betfair Hub for more.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.